It's been called Britain's Guantanamo Bay.
It looks forbidding and it looks grim. It looks like some kind of bunker.
This concrete fortress in southeast London is Her Majesty's Prison Belmarsh. It's home to Britain's most dangerous criminals.
Either side of me at one point were two Gangland killers serving 38 years each for executing people.
Belmarsh incarcerates drug barons, murderers, and terrorists.
Dangerous individuals. Make no mistake about it.
Clever, manipulative men, capable of escape and shocking acts of aggression.
You've got to remember that desperate people do desperate things.
How do the guards keep violent criminals under control?
The inmates are under a lot of pressure in these places. You know, you've got to be a human being and not be a thug.
And what's it like to do time in Britain's toughest prison?
Someone just walking out of their cell and stabbing you for no reason, that happens.
Along the corridors of Belmarsh, the prison has another name.
It's actually known as Hellmarsh.
We're exposing what life's really like inside Belmarsh. Belmarsh in southeast London is Britain's most secure prison. Built in 1991 for over £100 million, it houses our most dangerous criminals, known as Category A's. Multi-millionaire drug barons with global crime empires. Policemen who've turned into killer rapists. Terrorists who've created slaughter on Britain's streets. And former armed robbers like Noel Razor Smith.
Since the age of 14, I've been a criminal. I classed myself as a professional criminal in those days. And I ended up appearing at the Old Bailey and I was given 8 life sentences under the 2 Strike Act and 8 lots of 10 years, which made me a Category A prisoner and sent me to Belmarsh.
A Cat A prisoner is defined as a major risk to society. The first challenge is to stop them escaping, and Belmarsh is built for purpose.
People think that you're on the wing, you break out the wing, so now you're out the wing, and then you run over and throw a rope up the wall or the fence. It isn't like that at all. If you actually break out your cell, you're then in a fenced-off yard. And if you get through that fence, you've got another 6 or 7 fences to get to before you even get to the wall, the main wall. And the main wall has an anti-grapple dome around the top of it, so you can't even throw a grappling hook up there. It's got helicopter wires everywhere. You can't land a helicopter there.
Belmarsh is designed to be 100% escape-proof, and for good reason. Category A's are no ordinary prisoners, as the Belmarsh officers know only too well.
Cat A's. The intelligent level goes up a notch, generally. When you're dealing with lifers, long-termers, these are not your I can't read and write people. These are, you know, I can fashion an escape. I could really, you know, work out intricate systems and stuff. You know, a lot of them, are not all of them, but a lot of them are clever fellas.
If a Category A prisoner did escape, I'd be collecting my P45. That's how serious it is.
Former drug baron Andrew Pritchard was sent to Belmarsh after police found £1 million worth of cocaine in the boot of his car.
Best part of my life, I was an organised criminal, okay? I chose that life. It was my choice, okay? And I would do whatever I could to manipulate the situations. And the more I'd done that, the better criminal in my mind it made me.
From the moment an inmate arrives, the security is extreme. Even Andrew wasn't prepared for the Belmarsh welcoming party.
You're boarded, so you're taken off of the Cat E van. You're followed by an officer with an outstation dog on a lead. You're what they call double shanked. So if you've ever seen the Frankenstein films, where you've got this huge kind of cuff, that's the first handcuff, which is called a Frankenstein cuff, and that's attached to you there, onto an officer. Then you're handcuffed here to yourself, so it's double cuffed. One officer walks in front of you, one officer you're handcuffed to, one officer has the dog, the other officer has your kit.
Kevin Lane was found guilty of a gangland murder and was deemed the highest possible escape risk.
I was on remand for contract killing. So they said that I had contacts and a wealth of money and associates that would mount an armed escape.
Kevin fought for his innocence, travelling back and forth from Belmarsh to court.
When you're driven back through them gates, back into the prison, to the bleeding helicopters and the lights and all the noises and the doors slamming, you think, I am in trouble here.
Ex-boxer Pete McDonough was held as a Cat A on a murder charge before proving his innocence.
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and ended up going to court in the Old Bailey and then was transferred to Belmarsh High Security Prison. Just remember getting there, going in the holding cells. I remember trying to open the door of the holding cell. Straight away, people realised then that I'd never been to prison before because every door in the place is locked. All the feelings leaving me, realising that I'm going to be spending my first night in Belmarsh.
On arrival, every prisoner is strip searched.
The biggest part of being strip searched is they take your dignity, so they take everything away from you and realise that you've got no more control, that they're taking control of you.
Belmarsh is cleverly designed to minimise the risk of violence. There are 4 house blocks, each with 4 spurs that can be quickly isolated and locked down.
It is meant to prevent large groups of prisoners kind of mixing in an unstructured way, where you might then see violence and bullying break out.
Each house block becomes home to new inmates for many years to come. And Belmarsh is a scary place even for the hardest men. Accused of hosting online articles in support of the Taliban, Babar Ahmed was held in Belmarsh and other UK prisons for 8 years without trial, while fighting extradition to the USA.
Just the echoes of metro against metro, you will hear those echoes all day and all night.
Moazzam Beg was imprisoned in Belmarsh for 7 months on terrorist-related charges which were later dropped.
You are now essentially in the closest thing that you could be to a grave, to a coffin. And you've got to start now thinking about, well, what if I don't make it out of this place?
There's no more laughs. My face is just granite from the minute I get into prison. So you put on this personality that says, leave me alone.
Separating Cat A's is key to controlling them. They never share a cell.
You're putting intelligent men with not a lot to lose in one area, and they're going to do something, aren't they? Eventually, something's going to go.
If you've got 2 category A's in a cell together determined to get out, it's more dangerous than having one, according to the prison system.
Cat A's aren't allowed to get comfortable. They're regularly shifted from cell to cell without warning.
They strip you off in the cell, you put your clothes back on, they take you out, they put you into another locked cell with nothing in it.
A special team called the DST, the Dedicated Search Team, inspects each cell. Prisoners call it being spun.
They went around in sort of paramilitary uniforms with their trousers tucked into their boots and that, and you know, when they came on a wing, it was like, oh, Jesus Christ, someone's getting spun.
They were specialists at searching cells, and there is an art to searching a cell, okay? But they were really good at finding the hiding places.
They spend 2 or 3 hours stripping your cell, and they've got box of tools where they can take apart the beds. Every bit of furniture can be taken apart. They were hated by everybody.
They just try and make it awkward for you. They spin your cell, throw your cell up in the air, so you might get that at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Somebody found a bar of soap with a key impression in it. That obviously resulted in a lockdown, and that's changed all the locks in the prison, so just in case.
Whenever a Cat A prisoner leaves the cell block, an officer monitors every move. It's known as being on the book.
You'd move them like a registered letter, if you like. So if I was taking him to a visit, right, and your visit staff, I would have him on the book, it would have his name and everything, and I've already signed it that he's my property, and then I would pass him on to you, and now he's yours.
The tough regime for Cat A's means there's no way out. And with that comes an ugly problem. When Britain's most violent men realise there's nowhere to turn, they turn on each other. Assaults in Belmarsh are on the increase.
If you put 4 or 5 rats in a shoebox and hold them there over a fairly limited period, by the end of that period, they'll all be fighting. And it's pretty much the same thing. It's an oppressive atmosphere. It has a well-deserved reputation for being a violent place.
It's not like it's a little fight and you've got a problem with someone and you're not going to see them again. When you're doing a 30-year sentence or 40-year sentence, you're going to be bumping into the same person. You've got an issue, you have to deal with it. And that will result inevitably in serious injury or death.
The most dangerous time is when Cat A's mix with other inmates on the spur.
You actually had a pool table on the lifers wing in the centre of the spur, and somebody kicked off, say, we've got the pool cue, and started throwing pool balls up at the office and at the screws, and eventually they locked everyone up, come in and got him. The showers is always a bad place to get done, stabbed or whatever. The showers are a very dangerous area. And exercise yard as well. If there's enough people on the exercise yard, you can get away with quite a lot.
When violence erupts with Cat A's, Belmarsh has a major problem on its hands.
I've seen a guy get his throat cut waiting for the phone queue, because someone's frustrated. People get very frustrated and angry very easily, but violence is the biggest, way to release that.
To maintain control, officers must stop violence the moment it starts.
In a way, a prison officer is like a parent. And if you relinquish control to the kid, you've lost the house, haven't you?
There are some people that don't want to listen, they just do want to have a fight. And in them instances, sometimes you know straight away with a bit of experience when it's going to kick off and when it's not.
It's a very macho environment. And because of that, you get all sorts of violence and you get all sorts of mad people. You defend yourself in the best way you can, normally with it's various different weapons in prison.
Weapons are always available, aren't they? Let's face it. You got a pen, okay? You got a chicken leg, you make a bone out of it, you sharpen it, you stick it in someone. But a metal tray, mate, which I used to have, metal tray, slice your bloody head off.
Belmarsh is Britain's highest security prison. Its job? To keep the country's most dangerous criminals safely behind bars.
I think the security systems that they have at Belmarsh exceeded any that I'd seen before. You basically couldn't move without an escort.
Famed for being escape-proof, there is one chink in the prison's armour, transporting prisoners to and from court.
That's where the weakness, that's where the weak spots are, and they know those weak spots, and so they could fashion an escape. 2 did in Belmarsh while I was there, and these 2 inmates got out of a secure van and ran through the streets of Bermondsey, a high-level category A. They caught them, but one held a knife, held a blade to my mate's throat.
Today, the security is foolproof. Woolwich Crown Court, adjacent to the prison, became operational in 1993. The 2 are linked by a fortified underground tunnel.
It's not done for show, it's done because there's genuine concerns and fear that the people who are being brought to court are serious risks to the public and they will do anything.
The tunnel was a trip I had to make every single day while I was on trial. Takes you under the bowels of the prison. Then there are a series of automatic gates which officers were escorted with you.
Since the tunnel was open, no one has managed to break free, but keeping violent criminals under lock and key is a dangerous job. In the last 2 years, there have been at least 180 assaults on staff.
Colleagues of mine were assaulted, and very badly assaulted as well, and it's happening a heck of a lot more. In fact, a friend of mine that I work with, he's had 3 lots of boiling water thrown over him.
I was assaulted, so it's one of them things, it's part of the job. I had a kickboxer kick me in the Azure Farms. So you're just part of the job. You just got to, it's what you're there to do. You've got to take the punches now and again.
Principal officer in charge of the wing pulled me to one side one day and he said, I'll give you a little bit of advice. In here, the customer's always wrong.
Inmates say the violence goes both ways and is often sparked by aggressive guards.
I've actually been beaten by gangs of prison officers myself. I've had prison officers come into my cell with a knotted bed sheet and threaten to hang me, so I'd be just another prison suicide.
So when I was threatened by staff, for instance, I would hit them. I said, don't threaten me, because I won't suffer it. And they said, that's all right, it's we like violence. And next thing you know, the bell's gone off, someone's asleep on the floor, and I'm getting bent up and taken to the strip cells. Was I the problem? Or was the problem there already? It was definitely there already, because I do not go looking for trouble.
It can easily look as if officers are using excessive force, but it often takes 3 or more to safely subdue a prisoner.
It can look a very overuse of force because there's 3 onto 1, but that is to protect the prisoner, 1 each arm and 1 to protect the head.
Belmarsh has come in for a lot of criticism over the use of force. Officers are meant to record violent encounters on personal body cameras. But a 2021 report by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons found this didn't always happen.
For me, it was just something heavy hanging off his shirt. It was a bit of a nuisance, really. But I'm only there for the protection of everyone. I suppose they are a good idea in this day and age. But for me, you didn't need them years ago, so do you really need them this time around? Not so sure.
If I had a body cam on, I'd be using it because it would be in my interests to use it. Quite often, prisoners say things that aren't true, and if you've got the evidence there, they've got nowhere to hide.
What's clear is that guards in Belmarsh are at constant risk of attack by its violent Cat A inmates. Ex-boxer Kevin Lane was notorious.
I went on escort one day and some threats were made against me from a prison officer, threatening to kill me. He said, if we ever get you here, Lane, we'll kill you. We'll take these cuffs off, we'll have a chat about it. The cuffs come off during the search procedure. He wants me to stand there like a performing clown, lifting up my bleeding feet, showing him my palms and my feet. I've taken my clothes off over 10 times that day, in and out of court. It went off. I ended up knocking him spark out.
As a prison officer in Belmarsh, is there any way to avoid assaults?
Your first route is to just talk it down and see if you can resolve the situation. But there are some people that don't want to listen, they just do want to have a fight.
Charles Bronson, Britain's most violent prisoner, has been held in Belmarsh on more than one occasion.
Charlie Bronson had to be unlocked with 6 members of staff.
Originally convicted for armed robbery, he spent most of his adult life in prison. Bronson has assaulted both fellow prisoners and more than 20 officers.
There are some people you're just not going to break. Well, he's one of them.
George's boss at Belmarsh came up with a plan to handle Bronson. Wear him out.
Do circuits with him, take him for weights, take him for outside sports and things like that. He said, let's keep him busy. And Charlie is a man who feeds off respect. We respected him, respected his space, respected his parameters, respected him as a man, and we got the same back from him. And that's why he never kicked off with us.
You do have that staff and inmate grid, but you do also see the good in the job, who do a lot for those that need it.
Kevin Lane crossed paths with Officer George Shipton many times and remembers him well.
Up for the crack, have a good laugh with him, he had a good sense of humour. Never anything about him that told you he was bent, as in he'd do something he shouldn't be doing, who can see things that are unjust and they don't like themselves. Become a good friend of George. He was a credit to the job.
The inmates are under a lot of pressure in these places, and you can make life easy for them as well. You can make life a bit nicer for them if you can. That goes a long way. So you've got to use the skills of we're all born with it. You know, you've got to use those skills and be a human being and not be a thug.
Officers in Belmarsh risk assault every day, but there's an even darker threat. Some prisoners pretend to form a friendship with guards, only to exploit them. It's called grooming, and is a growing problem nationwide. Nowhere are officers more vulnerable than when dealing with the criminal masterminds of Belmarsh.
I think it's fair to suggest that some of those who are Category A prisoners are extremely, extremely manipulative, cunning, difficult, dangerous. And of course, the other thing that they've got is they've got a huge amount of time on their hands, and that gives them time to plot, to scheme, to look for vulnerabilities and weaknesses in individuals, to play games.
The whole prison needs to be aware of how grooming starts, and usually it starts by something very small. It might be, Gov, give us a fag. It might be, Gov, I've missed the post, can you post this out on your way home?
If persuasion doesn't work on an officer, there are other ways of making them cooperate.
We do know, for example, that at a prison like Belmarsh, where you've got a lot of people with gang connections and some serious crime experience, that staff are at particular risk of being blackmailed, threatened, bribed.
A woman officer has a relationship with an inmate. All the inmate's got to do, unless he's really in love with her, is tell another inmate. The other inmate says, I know what's going on. You know, you're bringing in phones for me now. And then suddenly you've got 8 or 9 guys who are all, you know, tapped into that one officer.
So one of the strategies that's used when working with very, very high-risk offenders is to not allow prison officers to serve in a post for too long. It's to move them from the role of working with high-risk prisoners to different wings, to different places within the establishment, or indeed to different prisons, so that they don't necessarily fall at risk of being conditioned or corrupted.
As grooming proves, many of Belmarsh Cat A's are clever and inventive criminals. Facing long stretches with plenty of time on their hands, they come up with ingenious ways to make life bearable.
Put human beings in a predicament where they've got nothing and they can't get nothing, and they'll manage to make something. You know, people will manage to make something out of anything.
Food from the prison canteen can get boring, so making snacks is high on the list of wants, and prisoners become expert at kettle cooking.
So people cook in the kettles, and how that works is people are quite, you know, clever. Sometimes they'll nick an onion or some fresh, you know, produce out of the kitchen, and you'd fry those up in the kettle with a little bit of oil. You know, you'd like, you know, mix up mackerel, tuna, and, you know, you'd basically do kettle cooking.
There used to be this older Canadian guy who was in prison for attempted robbery or something. And I remember one day he smuggled a packet of chilies. He smuggled these chilies in his underpants and bought them in that way. But, you know, mercifully, they were in a packet. And he said, look, I've got this, and we can make something really nice. Just this tiny, small act of charity, just to bring a bit of spice into my life.
Real inventiveness is saved for illicit alcohol. Cat A prisoners in Belmarsh have become expert at home brewing.
There's always a will, there's a way, like The Great Escape and so on and so forth.
We had a guy in the kitchen who used to steal raw rice or potatoes or, you know, any kind of fruit. And what you do is chop them all up, put warm water in, pour that in, just break up a loaf of bread into this bucket, cover it over, seal it all up.
You've got to feed it like a baby, keep it warm, and it'll grow up to be big and strong.
You have to keep tending it, it's a work of art. And you have to keep it down as long as you can. And keeping it down means keeping it hidden. One of the tricks we used to do in Belmarsh was on the bathroom on each wing, go to the top one and just write out a note saying, out of order, works department coming to fix soon, stick it on the window, and then fill up a bath with water, put your hooch in there, loads of buckets, cover it over with sheets. There'd be like a sauna in there. They'd see the notice and they'd think, that's it, you know what I mean, it's out of order. When your hooch is ready to go, you take down your notice and then get the screws to open the door and say, I want to go in, and you go in and get your hooch.
They're fantastic at hiding things. They're superb at it. And you hold your hands up in admiration sometimes. That's ingenious, you know, how have you done that?
And believe me, when you're dancing and the screws are going mental, how have they done it? Hey, you think, yeah, well off. Well done, lads.
Her Majesty's Prison Belmarsh in southeast London is known to prisoners as the UK's toughest jail. It's been home to Britain's most dangerous criminals, men like grinder killer and rapist Stephen Port, and Britain's most violent prisoner, Charles Bronson. In Belmarsh, violence is an accepted part of daily life.
Violence. So the prison system breeds violence.
Guards constantly battle to control the volatile Category A inmates. The ultimate punishment is a visit to solitary confinement in a segregation unit that takes up to 18 prisoners.
Some of the cells in there are a lot less kitted out. Some cells will have nothing in them. Some cells will just be padded for their own safety.
And you'll be held in that cell to demoralise you, weaken you.
Soon after I went in, somebody had given me a couple of joints, a mate of mine from outside, and I smoked them, and then I got called down for a piss test, a mandatory drug test, and it came back positive. The governor said to me, I'm giving you 7 days solitary confinement. He said, with no radio, no books, and nothing else. So I said, Governor, I said, not even a book. He says, you can have a copy of the Bible. So I went, in a rage, I went, I don't want your fucking Bible. So I've gone in, they've slammed the door on me. I've walked around this cell for about an hour and a half. There is just nothing.
Ex-boxer Kevin Lane was a regular visitor to the segregation unit, most often after squaring up to an officer.
Gone over there, I've chinned him, he's gone out. I've pulled his legs into the cell. The alarm goes off, they've come running in. They hit you, knock you over. They get the zip ties out, you're in locks, zip, zip, carry you. And they carried me to the block, and I spent another luxurious, lengthy time in a segregation unit. They gave me a letter to sign once. If you don't stop assaulting staff, you will remain in the segregation. I got a big red marker pen and signed bollocks. Give it back to them. And that's because at the time there, it was violence against violence.
You're not allowed to have any of your possessions. There's no TV there, there's no like kettle, or there's no PowerPoints. It's just basically a bed, just like a closed, dark place. You just stay in there by yourself all day, all night. It's sort of like when your teacher tells you to go and stand in the corner and face the wall.
I ended up talking to pigeons. Liked them, and all big pigeons, just feed them, they got very big. All right. I loved it in terms of you end up lighting your own company, you're not having any ag with the staff, you just get into a routine, but it is still isolation.
Incredibly, there's one part of Belmarsh that's even tougher than segregation. Belmarsh's HSU, the Notorious High Security Unit, is Britain's most secure lockup, a prison within a prison. It was built to house the worst of the Category A's, the most violent men in the system who cannot be housed on a normal cell block. Men like Hashem Abedi, responsible for killing 22 people and injuring over 1,000 in the Manchester Arena bombing. And David Bieber, who shot PC Ian Broadhurst in the head at point-blank range. Gangland criminals like Curtis Warren, so powerful and wealthy that he could fashion an escape from any other maximum security prison.
These are very scary people. This is where, in terms of threat and risk, the soup is thickest, if you like. So it's deep custody, it's the deepest that we've got.
And it's built to protect you, the public, because if they get out, they're not going to go straight. These are high-level criminals. These are top-level. You know, I mean, we're talking mafia and people like that, and top-level murderers or top-level hitmen.
The people who inhabit the HSU tend to be people who have been sentenced to life imprisonment, but usually with extensions. So people who have been sentenced to 25, 30, 35 years, the worst of the worst.
This is a group of hardcore villains who know the fucking score. They're not like running around the wings like slashing people for 10 quid worth of heroin. These are geezers shipping in like 10 million tonnes of it.
How does the high security unit stop its ultra high risk inmates from breaking out? For starters, the block has its own perimeter wall and entrance. Convicted of a contract killing, Kevin Lane was considered so dangerous that he was held in the HSU while awaiting trial.
AAA means it's classed as exceptional risk. It means that you do not come into contact with other prisoners who are high risk, and even guards have to be selected and passed to work with you. Going up to the unit as you approach it, it's got its own fence, it's got its own concrete walls, it's got its own lights. And you think, what am I going into?
Visiting the HSU came as a shock to defense solicitor Ferdinand Achom.
You go into the prison, and then you go into another establishment, and then there's a bus that drives you to the heart of Belmarsh, which I didn't even realize existed. You can hardly take anything in there. They go through your pens, your trousers. Even as lawyers, you search properly.
It's just a fucking horrible place. It really is. It's like being in a big submarine under the ground. You know, even the exercise yard is roofed over. It's that bad. You don't hardly see daylight in there. There's cameras in the cells. Apart from where the toilet is, there's a little bit blanked out, so you can use the toilet without being on film, but you're on film basically all the time you're in there.
So you're checked every hour, 3 times a day, through the night, with a torch. There was times when staff would rattle the door, so they wanted to see movement.
A key role of the high security unit is to prevent crime lords continuing to run their empires from inside Belmarsh. Drugs boss Curtis Warren was jailed for 13 years over a plot to smuggle £1 million of cannabis into Jersey. He's due for release in 2022.
He's not an angel. He's not an angel by far. But one thing I'll say is, you know, he's done his sentence, and he's done it properly. He's done it like a man. He could have folded, and he's been away for a long time.
Some of these prisoners are the sorts of people who have imported millions of pounds worth of drugs into the country, who on the outside could potentially have massive resources. Then it is a necessity in some ways that there's a high degree of control placed over those individuals.
Control of people like Warren relies on constant surveillance. Even lawyers' meetings aren't excluded.
Belmarsh is the only prison that I go to where there's cameras even in the consultation rooms. I mean, the premise behind why they say the cameras are there is to make sure that nothing untoward happened or was being said. But we as lawyers, the last thing we want to do is interfere or tamper with the administration of justice. Of course, we want to defend our clients and help them, but I don't think we want to break the law. But then I always find it intrusive to find a camera above my head, because you know you're being listened to and what you're saying is being recorded.
The point with the HSU in Belmarsh is everything is under surveillance. There's no way to communicate really from there that would not be intercepted by the authorities. So for a man like Curtis Warren, you know, he cannot communicate with the outside world. You know, with his worldwide web of criminal contacts, you know, that is almost the ultimate punishment.
HSU prisoners pose such a massive threat that even the guards treat them differently to the main prison population.
They just back off, they just give those prisoners a bit of space because they know that these guys haven't got much to lose.
Respect is the currency between staff and inmates. And the minute the respect breaks down, that's when the problems occur.
Occasionally you'll get a prison officer who just wants to be an idiot, and this officer would be coming and he'd be doing things like taking an extra milk carton, or you're not only allowed to have one, or taking an extra pillow, taking an extra blanket. So a group of prisoners then, they decided to basically to teach him a lesson. They grabbed the officer, they took him inside the cell. They had tuna cans, which they had put inside socks, and they just battered him for about 10 minutes. They just battered him all over the place.
Belmarsh's High Security Unit, or HSU, is the most secure lockdown in the entire prison system. It's a prison within a prison with multiple walls. Officers there can never let their guard down. Hashem Abedi, the Manchester Arena bomber, is coming back from his daily exercise break. With him is Ahmed Hassan, the Parsons Green Tube bomber. Both are serving life sentences, and both have little to lose. Without warning, they run off. They attack a prison officer, assaulting him with an office chair and kicking him. The officer suffers lacerations to his scalp, a bruised back and ribcage, and lasting damage to his hearing. Belmarsh holds as many as 20 terrorists at a time. Alongside Abedi and Hassan in the HSU have been men like Michael Adebolajo, who hacked Fusilier Lee Rigby to death on a London street. Cleric Abu Hamza was held in Belmarsh for 7 years for inciting violence. He was later extradited to the US to face further terror charges. While the terrorists, considered most dangerous, are kept in the HSU, there are many accusations in the press that extremists are radicalizing other inmates in Belmarsh.
There will be an issue there with having determined, ideologically motivated offenders very close by and with access to highly vulnerable, credulous, and often violent young men who are searching for meaning.
Belmarsh has been described in the press as a jihadi training camp. But is there any truth to this?
Whether you've gone into a place like Belmarsh already radicalized, or whether you've walked in and you become radicalized, it's plain to me that this is a place where there's ample opportunity for people to target vulnerable people and convert them to an ideological cause.
One radicalised prisoner is enough to go out and, commit murder. And that's one murder too many in my book.
We're talking about prison being an environment that often has a lot of people who are difficult, damaged, maladjusted, that don't have a lot of status or confidence. And they really can be prey for people who are going to use them for really nasty and nefarious purposes.
Every prisoner presents different challenges, but with most, the ultimate goal is to prepare them for eventual release, even if that's many years in the future. But some would question if it's possible to turn a serious criminal around. Men like Usman Khan. Khan was imprisoned in 2012 for plotting Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorism offenses. He received what's called an indeterminate prison sentence. Khan was to remain in prison for as long as it was necessary to keep the public safe.
So Usman Khan participated in a program called the Healthy Identity Intervention. It's one of the prison service's flagship programs, and I'm very critical actually of that as a means to intervene and change people's behavior. And I think he deceived the professionals who were on that program into thinking that he had abandoned his commitment to violence when he clearly and very tragically had not.
In 2018, after 5 years in prison, Khan was released on license. Less than a year later, in November 2019, he kills 2 people and knifes 3 others near London Bridge. Police shot him dead.
People, who can, if they wish to do it this way, can give you the impression that they are going to be model citizens in the future, that they no longer represent a risk to anybody at all. But how are you ever going to know for sure that you haven't had the wool pulled over your eyes?
Usman Khan puts a spotlight on a major question. Is it ever safe to release a Cat A prisoner? They've been imprisoned for serious and often violent crimes. And it's a harsh reality that 1 in 4 long-term adult prisoners reoffends on release.
I think it's just the nature of that type of person that's in prison. They don't want to follow a plan, they don't want to follow rules, which is quite often why they're in prison in the first place. They want to do things their own way.
Former drug lord Andrew Pritchard is a rare success story. He's a Category A who's managed to completely reinvent himself.
The day it changed was when I discovered something which just came like a bomb. It's called a conscience. Got a conscience. Every time I brought drugs into this country, every time kids went on the street and they sold those drugs and killed each other, I was behind that. So when you start to realise you've got blood in your hands, suddenly you think to yourself, it's time you've done something to change it. So my aim in life is to put back some good for some of the bad that I injected into it.
After spending almost all of his adult life in prison, former armed robber Noel Smith is now a writer.
What you have in prison is people like me and other people who finally have enough or have something that happens in their life. My son died, my 19-year-old son died while I was serving life, which changed my outlook completely and made me seek rehabilitation.
Because Belmarsh houses Category A's, the UK's most serious criminals, it has unique problems. Some inmates entirely reject any help.
Some people don't want it. Some people are quite happy to be criminals.
Being returned to Belmarsh is the biggest possible deterrent for continuing a life of crime.
Belmarsh is a completely different kettle of fish. It's different going to Belmarsh to any other prison. No matter how many times you've been there, it's still quite scary.
Belmarsh may be a frightening place, but high-security prisons play an important role. There will always be dangerous criminals that society needs to be protected from.
Belmarsh is basically known to criminals as the final stop.
I mean, I was able to get through it. It's not easy, and I know a lot of prisoners, they found it very hard.
You could really sort of lose your mind in there if you're in there for too long.
Do I want to go back there? It's not the first port of call.
You're fucked when you're in there. That's it. Yeah, it's not a good place to be in.
Her Majesty's Prison, Belmarsh, the most secure jail in the country. Built in 1991 to house Britain's most violent criminals. Men like grinder serial killer Stephen Port and murderer and rapist PC Wayne Cousins. But there's another fearsome side to Belmarsh. The untold story of a brutal prison torn apart by gang rivalry.
And someone just walked over someone and cracked him in the face and started punching him. It's only because someone else said, yo, when you see my man, do him.
The gangs coming in and mixing, they see each other on sight and they want to stab and kill each other.
Gang members fight to control a destructive trade in drugs.
Belmarsh, it's awash with heroin. You could get a bag of heroin easier than you could get a pillow.
Violence lurks around every corner.
See men fight and go mad and bully each other.
It's a very, very heated place. Everyone's angry.
What does it take to control the gangs?
If you're too soft, they'll walk all over you. It was them versus us.
And just how hard is it to do time in Belmarsh?
And have a tool ready, because when that door opens, it's kill or be killed.
We expose what life's really like inside Belmarsh, on both sides of the bars. Belmarsh Prison in southeast London is infamous for its top-level security. Once in, there's no way out. It's a Category A prison, which keeps Britain safe from our most dangerous murderers, armed robbers, and terrorists. But that's only half of the Belmarsh story. It also takes in offenders from all over London. Many are members of rival criminal gangs involved in vicious turf wars. There are 64 different gangs in the prison. Enemies outside, they're determined to carry on their deadly battles inside. In just 4 months in 2021, there were nearly 40 attacks between gang-affiliated prisoners, making the wings of Belmarsh a very dangerous place for everyone. Bobby Kasanga was part of the notorious Peckham Boys gang. He served time at Belmarsh for multiple armed robberies.
I grew up in Peckham, South London, so initially I was doing what everyone else was doing, was just your street robberies, and then that kind of progressed to bigger sort of crimes. People start carrying guns, some people start selling drugs, and some people go and do bank robberies, and for me, I went and done kind of all of those things.
Most London gangs define themselves by their area or postcode. Police have identified 200 different gangs, with many said to be involved in murders.
Belmarsh had every single person from London, from Brixton to Peckham to Clapham Junction, New Cross, Tottenham, Wood Green. All the gang rivals were all in the same place at the same time, and it was a hot place.
When rivals from different areas meet, violence erupts.
Conflict in prison usually starts over, traditionally, things that may have happened on the outside. So you see someone on the inside and, oh, that's the person I had a fight with outside, that's the person that killed my friend. And sometimes just trivial disrespect. You might be having banter with someone and then someone says something disrespectful and you can't take it.
Former drug baron Andrew Pritchard was found with £1 million worth of cocaine in his car. He was sentenced to 15 years. 2 of those were spent in Belmarsh.
I was arrested in East London and I was charged with possession with intent to supply Class A drugs.
Whilst in Belmarsh, as a Cat A prisoner, he regularly witnessed gang warfare that shocked him.
As soon as they see another postcode gang member, they'll attack each other. There's incidents where they'll kidnap them in a cell, they'll take a lighter, start burning their feet, they'll get them to get on the phone and, you know, try to transfer money into their accounts. The rule I always had in my mind was this: when that door opens, anything could come through it. So have a tool ready, because when that door opens, it's kill or be killed.
I remember my first week in Belmarsh in the gym. I think we just finished football, and someone just walked over someone and cracked him in the face and started punching him. He didn't have an issue with that person at all. It's only because someone else said, yo, when you see my man, do him. So he took the instruction of someone else and went and done that. And you kind of gobsmacked, you're thinking, whoa, what's going on there? I had issues with different people within different prisons. So, you know, going there, you might meet the wrong person. They might be putting you in a wing where all your ops are your rival gang members. If they put you in that wing, you're done for.
New arrivals are keen to build up their turf inside.
Got a lot of these gangs now, whereas before they might have thought twice because the cameras are on them. They don't give a shit. They'll stab another gang leader or another gang member. And if they get caught on camera, they don't care. So it's a lack of care whether they get caught or not. Because if they've got that job to do for their gang, they've got to do it. Because otherwise they're going to get done.
And you take that kind of mentality and you put it in a confined environment like Belmarsh. Obviously these prisoners are very likely to bump into each other on a regular basis. They might not mind getting arrested or getting caught, or even having their prison sentence lengthened if they get caught committing violence, because to them it's more important to be somebody in prison than to be nobody on the outside.
With gang violence a regular occurrence, how do you contain such a toxic mix of violent young men? Former prison officer Paul Whiteman was on the front line whilst working in Belmarsh in 2021.
And there's a lot of gang culture in there now with the kids with the postcode wars. They need to keep it apart. Like this person from this gang can't mix from this person from that gang, because if they meet each other, they will fight on sight. I don't know the gangs they can and can't mix with. They just want to fight each other just because they live in a different postcode. It's quite ridiculous for me to see.
Kevin Felton worked in a special security unit. whose job was to keep the gangs apart.
A prison officer's got to be fair. In the vast majority of prisoners, if you're fair with them, they're fair with you. There was a lot of thought going in on where to put people because of the gang culture. And you never know what's going to happen. You know what's going on, but you can't really do anything. And you can only stop sort of physical contact at that point in time.
A savage attack by a gang could leave life-threatening injuries.
On certain house blocks, maybe 80% of people are in for murder, gang-related murders. I was in the cell, and across to where we were, another guy was just sitting, having his dinner. The guy just walked down the stairs very casually. In his hand, he had a tuna lid. If you take a nail clipper, you can use it to actually open the tin of tuna. But also what it does is it creates a jagged edge around the lid. He literally walked over to the cell where the guy was eating, and he started from here. He bedded it into his head, took it down through his forehead where the bone was open, went through his eye, split that open, came down across his cheek, down across his mouth, and stopped out. Casual as a day, just walked out, up the stairs, trail of blood coming down. And just went back to his cell.
Sometimes you get the younger, hungrier members of a gang who want to make a name for themselves, and they want their status to rise within that gang. So they're willing to commit violence, they're willing to follow the instructions of the senior gang members just so that they have protection and they can advance themselves within the gang.
Belmarsh Category A prison in southeast London. Its notorious high-security unit has 47 cells housing the country's most dangerous criminals. From Manchester arena killer Hashem Abedi to rapist and murderer PC Wayne Cousins. But another 1,500 inmates pass through its gates each year. They range from armed robbers and murderers to drug dealers. While the highest-risk inmates are brought into prison separately, everyone else must face the melting pot of reception. It's an experience even the toughest never forget.
When you get into Belmarsh, obviously you do the whole strip search thing, take away most of your items, and then you get put into this sort of plastic clear box, and there's other boxes next to it as well with different people. The rival from a different gang can also end up in that same spot at the same time, and then literally, if you guys got real life beef, it gets cracking.
Daniel Marcheski, a former drug addict, has served many short sentences in Belmarsh.
At a young age, I started using drugs. By the time I was 21, I was full-blown crack, cocaine, heroin addict and in and out of prison. The security vans coming from so many different locations. It's inevitable that in those holding cells, there will be people there that are beefing with each other. I don't know whether it was ever possible for the prison officers to police that properly. It's a very, very difficult situation. You're going to get people in those holding cells that are against each other. It was awful. It was an awful experience.
Peter McDonough was wrongly imprisoned for attempted murder and spent a year in Belmarsh before being acquitted.
When I went to court, I thought I was going to get bail at the Old Bailey, and to be told that I was going to go to Belmarsh High Security Prison.
He remembers the tension in Belmarsh's holding cell, nicknamed the Cage.
It's like a fire alarm's just gone off. Everybody's running this way, that way. You've got so many different criminals in there. Drug addicts, murderers, car thieves, robbers, and all from different sort of walks of life. And it's mayhem. This place is a confined space. You know, it's emotions running high. People's left their wives outside. People have got problems at home. It's a very, very heated place, and everyone's angry. I was a boxer, so I was only small. Someone just got a little bit cheeky to me, and I thought, listen, I've got to stamp my authority straight away. My natural thing is attack if someone, you know, puts it on you, but let them come at you first. So he come at me first and bang, you know, put him in his place, kicked off in there. Before you know it, it was broken up and the screws broke us apart, and I stamped my authority from then on.
It's not just violent offenders who have to encounter the cage. Ex-cabinet minister Jonathan Aitken was sent to Belmarsh for perjury.
The scene in that cage was like the sort of Wild West gone wrong. I remember one gang all bashing up some young man, shouting at him, "You got the script wrong, you got the script wrong, that's why we're all in effing here," that sort of stuff. Very strong-looking guys just simply burying their heads in their hands and weeping. I remember one young man who was sort of so wild at the sentence he'd received that he just kept charging in the bars until he head split open.
Once inmates are booked into Belmarsh, they're moved to a temporary cell to be assessed in the induction block, known as Beirut.
The reason it's called Beirut is because it was a war zone. The Screws nicknamed it Beirut, and it's like a monkey house in the zoo. The noise is incredible. You know, people shouting from the landings, music blaring, because they're not in the prison proper now. So you've got nutters running around in there cutting themselves. You've got people screaming into the middle of the night because they haven't been sectioned yet.
I worked on House Block 3, which is the reception house block. We'd also take a lot of the prisoners from around the prison that were hard to handle, so it was quite a wild place.
As you walk down the corridors, everyone's eyeing each other up, you know, looking at each other thinking, you know, what's he all about, what's he in here for? Beirut was like, it was like being at a football ground. Let's call it Millwall, the crowd cheering, going mad.
When you are surrounded by very often intimidating characters, big-built, powerfully built men who inhabit a very closely confined space, you know, policed by a small number of prison officers. And when you get prisoners entering it for the first time, you know, you've entered into an environment where you are going to feel tremendously, tremendously vulnerable.
When inmates have been assessed in Beirut, a process that can take weeks or even months, they're moved into a permanent wing. Prisoners are spread across 4 house blocks, each with 4 spurs, housing up to 180 individuals. Being moved to your new home brings a whole new fear. Who are you going to be banged up with? Mixing older prisoners with fresh off the street youngsters is always going to create problems.
A lot of those young people, that young mentality who are still kind of heated, are now being put into a place. And if you speak to a lot of the elder people, they can't stand the young people. They're like, we just want to have a calm environment. The young people bring all the heat because of all the fights they're bringing. The last thing you want is kids in there fighting, causing more officers come to your wing and then searching up the place, so it's crazy.
You've got gangs, you've got, you know, people in for fraud, white-collar crimes, blue-collar crimes. The demographic of it goes from non-payment of TV licence to, you know, someone who's been in and out of prison for the last 20 years of his life, an armed robber, violent criminals, all sorts, drug abusers, you know, it's wide-ranging.
Unless prisoners have good reason to be separated, the allocation of cells is Russian roulette.
Matey boy, who's the biggest in the cell, he might want to play his jungle garage music till 3 in the morning. Well, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, because he's the top man in the cell.
I remember one incident, a guy had just come in. He was outside the cell, shaking and sweating, and he was like, I can't believe I'm sharing a cell with this guy, he doesn't seem right. So I asked someone, he said he'd actually chopped off someone's head and stuck a post-it note on it. The young guy that was sharing the cell with him hadn't slept the whole night because he was frightened to fall asleep just in case he would get the same fate.
If it's not a maniacal murderer, or a gang member with violence on his mind. It could be a drug user with a dangerous addiction.
They put me in a three-man bang-up. All of a sudden, someone started smoking heroin and buzzed on the door. I said, look, get me out of here, because I said, I'll end up killing him. I said, I'm not about that business. And they put me in a single cell. I used to just say, bang that door as hard as you can. You know, they're all crazy outside. I just want to make sure I'm safe in here. Make sure you lock it. See you in the morning, Gov.
I would always hope that I got put in a cell with another addict, because the stuff that I would experience in prison it was not pleasant at all. It would always be better for me to be in a cell with someone that is going through the same kind of detox that I was.
When Daniel Marcheski was banged up with an inmate who had serious mental health issues, it turned into a nightmare.
As I was chatting to my cellmate throughout the evening, he started to, lose his capacity to hold a grounded conversation, to say the least. Over the stages of time, I realised the man's not well, seriously not well. It's clear that he's having some sort of episode. About half an hour went on and he defecated on himself, lost his mind in front of me and started hallucinating quite severely. This poor man became completely overwhelmed with fear. Fear of everything. Fear of any noise, fear of me, fear of what he thought was jumping through the window at him. Not a nice situation to be in. You're watching the clock, thinking, please get this man out of my cell, or get me out of the cell.
Mental health issues are a massive challenge in Belmarsh. Up to 240 prisoners a month are referred for mental health assessment.
So my mental health deteriorated. I was losing my sanity. I started to neglect my physical health. I did actually try to take my life and obviously hang myself off the end of a bed. And I had a gov just look through the door at me and just watch me do it. But obviously I'm still here, but yeah, it was crazy and that was traumatic for me.
We don't physically become broken, do we? Mental side of it, it's a big, big side of it, and I don't think it's. I don't think they've got the support in the jails. You know, we find a lot of people that commit suicide or harm themselves in jail are people that have been nicked for drink driving 2 or 3 times, and they just can't handle prison. It's not people that are doing 20 years.
From inmates with mental health problems to violent criminals and even white-collar prisoners, the population of Belmarsh is a mixed bag. For ex-Cabinet Minister Jonathan Aitken, imprisonment meant entering a world completely outside his experience.
The prisoners of Belmarsh had been well informed about my arrival in the jail, and suddenly by my left and right cell neighbours set up a sort of, at first quite a gentle Afro-Caribbean chant. Suddenly it spread to other wings and across the exercise yards to other house blocks. And the whole darn jail seemed to be joining in this very aggressive chant about tomorrow morning, lads, let's show him what we can do to Tory cabinet ministers and their testicles or something like that.
I'd seen him on the television news the night before. We'd all watched it in his Savile Row suit and his, his handmade shirt and brogues and that. He was a posh boy. That was a black mark against him straight away. He was a Tory. That was another black mark against him. He was good friends with the then Home Secretary Michael Howard, who was making it hard for prisoners at that time and was absolutely hated in every prison. So people were determined he was going to get some comeuppance.
I discovered quite early on that the sort of Mr. Big of the Beirut wing was somebody called Razor.
As he came onto the landing, I walked up to him, stuck my hand out, and went, Razor Smith. At that time, I was like 19 stone, you can imagine, all my tattoos up my arms and everything.
He said, I hope you're not a friend of that effing, something or other, Mickey Howard. And I was tempted, so, you know, I can't stand Michael Howard, I hardly know him, but I was in jail for perjury and I was trying to reform. So I thought I'd better not, you know, tell another big porky here. So I said something like, well, I'm very sorry, but personally, Michael Howard's actually rather a friend of mine. He's a good guy, and this did not go down well with Razor Smith, who growled ferociously and says,
there he is, talking to this 19-stone tattooed, bald-headed thug of a prisoner in this prison wing where he's never been before in his life, surrounded by people who go, hey kid, and all that. You know what I mean? Giving it all, you mug. And he was so loyal to his mate, and so, there was no guile in him.
Well, he says, at least you're effing loyal, and that'll do you some good in this place. I, from that moment onwards, sort of knew this was a guy I could probably get along with.
Alongside its role as a high-security Category A prison, Belmarsh also houses a wide cross-section of criminals from all over London. As prisoners settle in, they discover that the prison is like a village. It's a close-knit community where black market trading is a way of life.
Wherever there's a curfew, okay, or prohibition, there's always opportunities for people to make money on different scales.
All new inmates are given a TV, kettle, and bedding for their cell. Prisoners have a small weekly allowance to buy snacks from the canteen. But sought-after foods form the basis of an underground economy.
It's a packet of biscuits to get your washing sort of lifted, ahead of the queue a little bit, 2 tins of tuna for a haircut, because obviously haircut in prison is a big thing. And you have various trades. So the currency of tins of tuna, that's gold standard currency. Imagine tuna being gold, biscuits being silver.
It's serious, mate. You want a game of pool and you play for a packet of jammy dodgers. If you don't give me them jammy dodgers, it's going to go off. There's going to be murders.
Cells become pawn shops where things are traded and gambled. The most business-savvy of inmates quickly branch out into more lucrative income sources.
We had the blackjack table 21, which was, I guess, the most lucrative because everybody would come. I'll give them a limit, so they can only gamble up to £50. They have to put that money into my account. Once that money's in my account, then you get more chips. So with that, I was able to then go and start buying canteen. So I had sardines, tunas, cookies, whatever it is.
The swapping around of canteen and you know, owing each other this and that, that's always going to happen. If it's not causing any trouble, if it's all innocent and they're just swapping about, yeah, that's fine.
The trouble is, it's not always innocent. If debts aren't paid, things quickly turn nasty.
It might be trainers, it might be t-shirts, it might be drugs, it might be weapons, but it will also be the economy that surrounds those things. It's an unwritten rule of prison that if you borrow something, the value of that increases doubled a week. It's a system known as double bubble. So if you borrow £10 from me, it's £20 next week. It's £40 the week after. It's 80 quid after that.
You see people get into all sorts of troubles because of debts, and a lot of times, because they know they're in trouble, they'll let the officers know and they try to move to a different wing. But then word will get on, oh, that guy's run off with a debt on that wing, it's your debt now, take it and just give me half. Wherever you kind of go, people kind of find you. But you see people get beaten up, you see people get cut because of debts.
The underground economy becomes darker and far more profitable when banned products come into play. In Belmarsh, 2 things are valued above all else: drugs and phones.
A phone in Belmarsh probably would go for like £1,000. £1,000 for a phone.
A mobile phone that trades hands on the outside for just a few pounds, 10 times the value when you transport it into prison custody.
With big profits to be made, prisoners go to extraordinary lengths to smuggle in banned goods.
I mean, there's obviously the way of the anal passage that's quite popular.
There was a few guys on the wing that eventually got hold of those little tiny mobile phones, and they would secrete them prior to getting their sentence and get them on the wing like that.
The only business bigger than phones is drugs.
Drugs in a jail are probably worth 3 times what they are on the streets outside. It's a lucrative business. We were convinced that prisoners actually came in to deal drugs in jails because it was worth it.
Michael Lotham was in and out of Belmarsh on a number of occasions.
As soon as I came on the wing, it'd be like, yeah, Mick's here. And they know that 9 times out of 10, I'd either be holding or sorting out ways to get something. I was using as well as like dealing.
It's worth inmates spending time thinking up clever ways to get around security.
You're there for 8 hours a day, they're there for 24 hours a day. So they've got 3 times the amount of time to think up different schemes to do things than what we have.
Bogus solicitors coming in, bringing goodness knows what. Visitors putting drugs in nappies in babies, in clothes in toddlers, or drugs on the end of a bit of cotton or fishing wire so that they swallow and then they can bring them back up.
You might have a hole cut into your jogging bottoms or whatever, sitting on a chair, as in how I'm sitting on it now. Come to the edge of the chair, like that. Once they've got it in their hands, they just proceed to put it away like this, and it's inside you. Like, as a prisoner, we call it bottling.
In 2018, Belmarsh installed a full body scanner known as the Boss Chair. It's a highly sensitive metal detector which scans new arrivals for anything hidden inside their body.
This sort of looked basically like an electric chair. If you weren't told this chair, you know, it's going to search your body, you thought that your sentence was about to expire on the spot there and then.
Smuggling drugs can lead to a spell in solitary confinement and even a bigger sentence. But a greater risk is falling out with other inmates over deals gone wrong.
I knew people that were in gangs. A lot of them were actually in prison for the sale of Class A drugs. There will always be guys on the wing that are competing for hierarchy in the sale of contraband and drugs. Always, if you had drugs or a mobile phone, you'd secrete them. You'd be very silly to think that they were safe in any part of the cell.
If you do have it, you better be able to protect yourself, because if you can't protect yourself, someone's coming for that. You'll be in a cell, 3 or 4 people are in your cell now, and they'll be like, yo, hand it over. Hand over what, kind of thing. And then obviously people do things that put things up their bum and stuff like that, and literally people say, it's in your bum, shit it out.
In Belmarsh, fighting over drugs can lead to frightening acts of aggression.
There were a number of ways that violence would take place on the wing. One of those ways was the sugar water, or what is known as getting jugged. Someone would fill up a jug full of boiling hot water, chuck loads of sugar in it and just chuck it on a bloke's face. And that was one of the worst things that could happen to you.
It strips the skin because the sugar clings to your skin and turns to treacle. I've seen it done many times.
Michael Lotham has a permanent reminder of being jugged after a deal went wrong.
He asked me for, let's just say, 3 bags of heroin, and I would get back double of what I give him. So I sorted him out. And then after the visit time, I'm waiting for him to come back to me, and he didn't appear. So I went to his cell, I lost my temper, I ended up punching him up. I said to him, when you came to me, I gave it to you, I never made you wait. Go and sort it out. And he left. I I was sitting down and I see his head pop round the door. He had a big jug and he just launched it at me. I could see like the bubbles coming on my skin and that. The pain, I was just on fire. I felt the shirt that I had on tearing into me, and I took my top off. And when I looked in the mirror, I was white. See it for yourself. For months, I couldn't sleep lying down. It will never go away. I'm very lucky that it came back like this.
Despite the dangers, the drug trade in Belmarsh continues, with plenty of desperate customers. Drug use amongst male prisoners countrywide is at an all-time high. The number of offenders becoming addicted whilst in custody has more than doubled in the past 5 years.
A lot of people get the habit for drugs in prison. In prisons like Belmarsh, it's awash with heroin. If you want to become a heroin addict in Belmarsh, you can. You could get a bag of heroin easier than you could get a pillow.
On the wings, there's a melting pot of addicts. Of course, you know, drugs in order to escape. Literally, if you can't break through the walls, you can escape in another way. I see men fight and go mad and bully each other. Went from heroin to any drug, and then spice came in, and that was just the rage.
Spice is a popular drug on the Belmarsh house blocks. It's a cocktail of chemicals mixed with plant material and is sometimes misleadingly called synthetic cannabis.
Spice is very popular in prisons because it's very easy to smuggling. There's actually been many cases of children's drawings that have been coated with spice. And then once the spice comes into the prison, they can tear it up and smoke it.
Spice is very addictive. You've got people who maybe never even smoked weed and they're going straight into smoking spice. I've seen people literally like zombies looking crazy, and you think to yourself like, what the hell? And they're just literally in their cell and you talk to them and they're not even responding.
Inmates high on spice are often physically abused by other prisoners.
I saw things become quite awful. I did use spice on a couple of occasions. I just tried it and thought, that's not for me at all. I do not want to be in prison feeling that feeling.
Spice is an absolute disgusting drug. You know, what chance have the kids got, what chance have the youngsters got within prison in Belmarsh?
Her Majesty's Prison, Belmarsh, a Category A prison, housing everyone from terrorists to murderers and gang members to petty thieves. By mixing career criminals with first-timers, Belmarsh almost inevitably runs a risk of becoming a school of crime.
Gone are the days when convicted prisoners weren't allowed to mix with unconvicted prisoners. You do have to manage it carefully, because the last thing you want is for some first-time prisoner to come in and go out a career criminal.
You know, there's an old story that you go in for robbing a car and you come out being able to be a safe breaker because you learn all this inside. There's a downside of mixing all these different people.
People that go to prison, they're all tarred with the same brush, but there's so many different crimes what people are away for. So it's very, very hard to congeal all them people together and to get a positive response when they leave the jail, because some people go in there for little crimes, end up coming out and just going backwards and forwards again. And you know, you've got people that go in there for 6 months and end up doing it for the rest of their life.
Today's Category C is tomorrow's Cat A. They're on their way up in the crime world and they're making names for themselves.
Along with learning the tricks of the trade, low-ranking and vulnerable inmates are easily exploited by hardened gang members.
The picture of how gangs will threaten and use other prisoners is more complex than sometimes we recognise. They'll get prisoners who are vulnerable, who are regarded as the lowest on the social hierarchy, and when they smuggle new psychoactive substances in, they'll test them on those prisoners. They'll give them to see what the effect is, how strong the dose is, and very often that sees prisoners overdosing.
So you will get a lot of these gangs congregating in cells. But the rule was any more than sort of 2 or 3 in a cell, then you hoist them out. You don't let sort of, you know, 4, 5, 6 in a cell because they're obviously up to no good. A lot of it is a bit of congregating, you know, younger inmates will be manipulated, so you just have to keep an eye on them for their safety.
Nicknamed Belmarsh, Belmarsh is a tough prison that holds equally tough inmates. So how do the prison officers stop the hardest men controlling the weaker prisoners?
If they start dominating the wing, and then once they dominate the wing, they try and dominate us, that's when it can't happen. That's when it can't happen, or you lose control. You can't let them have control. You've got to control it for the safety of other inmates as well, not just the officers. It's not just about us. We've got a legal right to look after the rest of the inmate population.
Keeping order is priority number 1, and with staff numbers cut by nearly 30% in recent years, there's little time to prepare prisoners for release and what might hopefully be a fresh start.
Someone said to me, well, why don't you do more rehabilitation work and sit down with them and discuss things? I said, I'm not being insulting or anything. I said, by the time I left the prison service, we had just about enough time to unlock them because we were that understaffed. We had just about enough time to give them exercise. Put and sit down and discuss how to rehabilitate them. Every year it was do more for less.
Lack of education, lack of work, homelessness, drugs, all combined just lead to crime. And until you sort of tackle all of those, you're going to forever be having the one that says he's never coming back in again.
With almost 60% of prisoners returning within a year, can rehabilitation ever be a realistic aim for Belmarsh?
You've got to churn a very unpredictable short-term, short-sentence prisoners, knowing that they're not going to be held there for very long and then they're going to be out again to reoffend and be back through the door again. Whether the right place for them is a prison like Belmarsh is a very, very good question. But I think what we can say is that there's very little that's going to go on in Belmarsh that's going to address the causes of their offending behaviour in the first place.
I think if you educate people, it might rehabilitate people. You know, you're not rehabilitating people by leaving them in a cell and they're smoking heroin. That's that, you know, what is that rehabilitating? You know, they do education in there, but what sort of education, I don't know. Give them people skills, give them life skills. That's what they need.
But despite all the pressures inside and outside of Belmarsh, some men defy the odds and turn their backs on crime.
It's so funny because every time I go past these security vans, I look at them and I think to myself like, what the hell possessed you? This is actually crazy. When you think about it, what you've done there was crazy, but as a young man, you think with greed.
The nature of my addiction led me to serve many short sentences. It was like a revolving door for me, you know, crime, drugs, jail, crime, drugs, jail. And when I was in Belmarsh prison, and frankly, outside of Belmarsh prison as well, the thought and the hope of finding a rehab was like it was almost like an urban myth. I wasn't able to find that until I was met by people that understood exactly where I was at and that could empathise with me.
If you want behavioural discipline and you want to be a changed person, then jail can be that for some people. The way that I was in prison and the things that I went in for, to the man that I've got out to and the man that I am today, I'm proud of where I've come from. Like, I've come from rock bottom and now the only way is up. So, and now I've got a job, I'm settled down, I've got a fiance, been successful, my family love me, I'm the man that I am today. So I work for my money And yeah, it's changed my whole life, obviously. I'm a different person to this day, and it's just made me so happy.